Hey, I'm Felissa Rose, and you're watching Keto and Crime.
Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. Today we have a very special video on you, a very candid conversation I had with Jenn from the Mom YouTube channel, which you see in front of you. She is a member of the LGBT plus community. She is a former member of the LDS Church and has built her channel on basically pointing out what she sees as the issues with the Mormon Church as it stands now. She is not anti-Mormon, just like I'm not anti-Mormon, and she also has some very good in-depth coverage of the Daybell Vallow case from an insider's perspective, in that she understands many of the doctrines that Chad has put forth. We had a very great conversation about the Daybell case, about the Mormon Church in general, as well as about politics, how to meet each other in the middle, because we are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but we still managed to have a great conversation and discover that if we just put our heads together, we can make things happen. And so, with that being said, I want to take you into my conversation with Jenn from the Mom. Let's get into it. Everybody, welcome back to Keto and Crime. Tonight I have a special guest. I have Jenn from the Mom. If you've been following any type of LDS informational videos, or confessions of a former LDS, or the Daybell case, which if you watch this channel, I know you're following the Daybell Vallow case, you've probably found her channel, and she's been very gracious enough to come on and discuss her journey out of Mormonism, the Mormon Church in general, and her thoughts on the Daybell case as well. And with that being said, welcome, Jenn.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here because, like I said, I love your channel and your content, and you saved me a lot of money reading those books. And headaches, I would say, and headaches. But I'm just gonna do like a really quick disclaimer because this has been an issue. I do not hate Mormons or the Mormon Church. I am just making connections where they apply and trying to figure out how this group was able to take little teeny connections and just blow them up. So I definitely have my opinions, and yes, I do have a potty mouth. I'm going to try and control it.
It's okay. They've heard me cuss many, many times,
Yeah.
especially when I have a similar issue. When I was reading the Daybell books, I did not put a disclaimer on the first couple, and I had a lot of LDS that attacked me, saying that I had the theology all wrong. And I'm like, I'm talking about what Chad Daybell wrote, not what the actual Mormon Church wrote. So I have, I'm going from the source material that I have for this book. So I'm putting that out there as well. We do not hate the Mormon Church.
Yes. So I know it can be offensive to some people when they, when you think there are no flaws that exist in your church or organization. That goes for any type of group, right? But most of my family members and friends that still practice, they're very level-headed, kind people. They see the flaws, and we've talked about them. And you can totally disagree with me. That's fine. But I do read my scriptures the best that I can. So
Absolutely. Well, tell me then a little bit about your history with the LDS Church and your current journey, and then we'll get into some questions about the LDS Church itself, and then we'll finish out with the Daybell case.
cool. So I am actually descended from early Mormon pioneers. So I am talking 1835. They were converted by Joseph Smith himself. It's a big name in Utah. If I said it, you would know who I would be talking about. I'm not going to say it just because at this point I'm not quite comfortable. I might be in the future. The Levitts, just kidding. Yeah, it was the Levitts. I can say that because it's not my last name. But so that is on one side of my family, and on the other side, my great grandparents and then great grandparents. So I'm talking my dad's side, his maternal grandparents, and then his paternal great grandparents. they came from overseas. They were converted by Mormon missionaries, and they were told that Salt Lake City was Zion, and that that's where the saints were gathering, which is different than we know. Like, Missouri is really the spot, Independence, well, right outside of Independence, Missouri. So I'm just saying this is what they were told, and so sometimes I'll refer to Utah as Zion. And like the video I made last night, people were like, well, no, that's, I'm like, I know, but we're trying to figure out what, very weird connections and things. So, yeah, as far as the Daybell case, and we'll talk about that later. But so anyway, I am I was born and raised in a Mormon family. I was sealed to my parents when I was 6 months old because one of them was a little bit naughty and couldn't get their temple recommend right away. And then I grew up, I was baptized, I was active in the church. I went to church with my grandparents after my parents, they weren't so active, and kind of, it was a rough drama type of situation. So it wasn't a typical Mormon home with like family home meeting and stuff, but although I did try and start that with my siblings, didn't really work. But I was very active. Like I said, my grandparents were very active, so I did a lot with them. And when I was in middle school, I started getting bullied by a group of girls. I was in Young Women's, and I think it was really because, my parents were no longer going, and so sometimes I wasn't going as much, and they, would say things like, if you ever came to church, you would know. And it's like, well, I only missed 2 Sundays, so so there was that factor. And then when I was in high school, something happened at girls' camp, which I think we called it rough camp back then. And it caused a lot of, rough camp. It wasn't that rough. But it caused like a lot of trauma in that at that point. I was still going to seminary, and it was like maybe my junior year that I was like, I can't do this. Like this, I'm kind of being bullied, and I still believed in it though. I kind of stopped going, but I was also an athlete in high school, so I didn't have a lot of time. And then, even though I still believed it, I met my husband, and he was not Mormon, and he had no interest in it. And I remember when we were dating, I was like, well, I'm at least going to get my children blessed in the church and baptized. We don't have to go every Sunday, but, I still believe in it. But I was 18 years old and 19 when we got married. So I was really trying to be straight, really hard, guys. Like, I am not gay. There's no way.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. So it was a lot of denial. So I still believed in it. When I was about 26, I started doing some research, and there were some inconsistencies. And so I stopped going, and there I had a lot of problem, believing in a lot. I like really wasn't sure what to believe in anymore. And then so I just kind of put it in the back of my mind, like, oh, I don't want to think about it because I don't know the answer. And then and then my husband, eventually I told him I was gay. We tried to make it work, and
Is that a thing? May I ask? Because you see those shows like it was like on TLC, because the Learning Channel is such a wonderful thing of learning now.
Yeah.
It was something like gay Mormon men, or men with same-sex attraction. That's how they said it, that were still married to their wives. Is that really a thing? Like, if you like tell the Mormon Church you're gay, they're okay with it as long as you don't act on it, and they will actually try to get you to stay with your family no matter how miserable you are and how miserable you make your family?
Yep, absolutely. There's a website. It used to be called Mormon and Gay, and I should probably say Mormons don't like to be called Mormons. They like to be called Latter-day Saints, and the church to be referred to as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have my reasons for not using that terminology. But yeah, there's a website. I think it's still up, Mormon and Gay. And on the Mormon Church now, the church website kind of changes, because since I'm in policy in Utah, I go on and research a lot, because a lot of the policies I'm involved with, Mormon Church is involved with, at least in some sense. So it kind of changes, but what I believe is the case most recently is, and they may call it same gender attraction now. It may not be same sex attraction, maybe same gender. I don't know. But yeah, if you go to your bishop and you're like, hey, I'm into chicks or I'm into guys, you know, they will counsel you. You know, you're still a member of the church. You're not automatically kicked out unless you do act on it. And when you act on it, that's, you know, I don't want to say excommunicable because that's not really a thing in the Mormon church. I actually wanted to do a video to clarify that. Excommunication doesn't exist anymore in the Mormon church. It's called withdrawal of membership privileges. And it's not a permanent thing. It's actually temporary. It can be permanent if you want it to be.
They make it sound so nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're like, it's no longer a disciplinary council, it's a membership council. Like you all meet and mutually decide that you're gonna have your recommends pulled and stuff. But so yeah, there are a lot. There was a blogger, Josh Weed, and he was actually on like not Dateline, probably like 2020 or something. This is a long time ago. I think it could have been before I even was ready to come out. And him and his wife were so great. And when he first came out, he was like, I love her and I'm going to stay with her. And then a few years later, they were both like, we just cannot do this anymore. You're living a lie. And you can only understand that if you are gay and have tried to live that lie, I think. But yeah, so they do. It's like, we love you, but you're also an apostate. So it's an interesting stance.
I did not mean to interrupt you. That was the perfect time to ask that question. So I apologize.
Oh no, feel free, because I totally have ADHD. I really do. I'm diagnosed with it, and I go on several side tangents. So you feel welcome to keep me focused.
Well, so once you came out of the closet to your husband, and then did you confess it to your bishop or anybody at a church, or?
No, at that point I wasn't going to church anymore. So I didn't really even know who my bishop was. I would sometimes go to different events with members of the Relief Society, but not church sponsored events. Definitely not preparing people BS. That's been around forever, by the way. So I told him, and that was 2006, right? We stayed married until 2015.
Wow. So 9 years.
Yeah. And I was just like, I looked at it at that time. I was like, well, people that are straight, they have attraction to the opposite sex and they don't cheat, right? They might find the opposite sex attractive, but not cheat. And I kind of like put it into my head like that, like, just be loyal. But I met my wife, and I wasn't planning on meeting anybody. I just went on this activity. It was actually a fun bus to Wendover. It was like a lesbian fun bus trip to the casino out in Wendover. And we just kind of hit it off and we became friends. And then I just, told my husband, and we went through all that, but we're friends now. I would say everything is civil. I didn't actually resign from the church. So I officially resigned in 2015 because they came out with a policy that said children of gays could not get baptized. Yeah, which
they
also
think it's. Do they think it's like they're like, what's a good way of saying it, contaminated?
I don't know. Their excuse was that, well, because they can't have a celestial forever family, and so it's doing them a disservice. Some things are about semantics and trying to spin. I mean, in general, this isn't limited to Mormonism. You spin to fit your narrative, right? So they came out with that, and I was really hurt. And like my kids had no interest, but at the same time they were like, but even if we wanted to, we couldn't be baptized. And I was like, right. And it hurt them too, just to know that because of our family, we didn't have that chance. If they don't have a chance to get baptized in a religion, then that means they don't have a chance to achieve exaltation in the celestial kingdom and be their own god or goddess on their own world one day, which is true, even though the church says it's not anymore. So
I think that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I know. I was like, that's the coolest thing in the doctrine. What the
I
what
could
are
be
you
a
doing?
goddess. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah. Um, but so at that point, I was like, you're pretty much denying my child any chance at those
Yeah.
blessings unless they denounce me. And how is that to put a child in a situation where they have to say, what my mom does is wrong, who my mom is wrong? And they ended up reversing that policy a couple years
Good.
later because they lost a lot of members.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of closeted, a lot of
yeah,
closeted,
well, there's a joke that the reason why we have a pretty high population of LGBT plus in, I don't know if it's so much transgender, non-binary, but gay and lesbian in Salt Lake City. And we laugh because it's like, yeah, because most guys will tell you they figured it out on their mission.
Love it.
Yeah, I don't think they acted on it, but I think their mission, they were like, okay, all right. But
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
spend every minute of their day with their companion.
Yeah. It's got to, especially when they send them, they're what, 17, 18? I mean, they're not
19.
19, not too far out of puberty. I mean, some of them may still be kind of in puberty. It's a very confusing. Puberty is a confusing time for any kid, much
Yeah.
less throw that in the mix,
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of them, they go because they're like, if I do this, maybe my thoughts won't, I won't be gay. I can, I don't know. I think it's, what we see a lot, people that are very, very religious and
Hmm.
anti, they tend to later, we find out that they're gay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think of a lot of people that are anti-gay. They usually, like politicians are, we usually find them in a men's room at some point, hitting
Marriage
on
Greg.
somebody. Yeah. So, usually closeted people are the most anti. And that
Yeah.
goes for anything,
Yeah.
I think.
And I think I was in middle school. Like I look back at some of the things I would say, and I'm like, I wish that there was one kid that I picked on, and I'm so ashamed to say it, and it was just pure fear.
Mm,
And so if that kid is out there, um,
yeah.
yeah, I feel terrible, and I really wish I would have been a friend to him instead of playing into the crowd because I was so scared that if I was his friend, people would think that I was gay too.
Yeah, I never picked on anybody, but I was very anti-LGBT being raised. I was raised in a very uber conservative family. I'm still, I'm still a moderate when it comes to politics. I swing right on some things, left on a lot of things. I'm more of a libertarian, so I'm very out there when it comes to social policy, but more conservative on some things. But yeah, I mean, I was very but when I look back sometimes at my yearbook pictures, I look like a boy. I mean, I dressed like a boy. I had short hair. I wore t-shirts and sweatshirts and jeans. I did not make any attempt to look like a feminine woman at all. So I'm looking back, oh, I was a closet case.
Oh, I look back at my yearbooks too, and I'm like, gay, so gay. I look a
Yeah.
lot more feminine now just because that's,
Mm,
I like to look more feminine.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, like my sister and my cousin were like, yeah, it was the haircut. That should have tipped us off, in high school. I'm like, well, I was a swimmer, and a lot of swimmers cut their hair short.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, I mean, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely look like I was on the other end.
Yeah, I had really thick Coke bottle glasses before lens thinning came out, so I was like a boy. And my mom used to get mad because sometimes people would ask, "How's your son?" Or something like that. So she used to get so mad. And my sister's actually gay too, so it's, you know, my poor fundamentalist
Yeah.
mom got a double whammy. But and and she used to tell me, I just didn't know. I don't speak to her much anymore, but when I finally talked with her, she said, I just never knew. I said, Mom, did you ever actually look at me?
Yeah.
I had no interest in boys. I dated one guy in high school, and he later came out as gay. We were kind of like each other's beard.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. My boy too. I had a boyfriend, and then I went to a dance with another guy at one point. We were friends. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's totally, we're like both gay now, actually. And then my other friend that I went to a couple dances with, he is too.
It was just, we tried to look normal, but we weren't, whatever
Exactly.
normal is.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so, I'm still like, tell me if I'm wrong, and I've never really asked another LGBT member of the LGBT community this, and I have a joke about it because I'm a stand-up comedian. I do have a bit about it where I talk about I was, in my day it was just LGBT. I understand all of that, but now this whole LGBTQIA plus, I said it's just getting too broad.
Yeah.
I
You know
don't
what?
understand what all of that is.
We laugh about that all the time. So we're both Gen Xers. My wife's on
Me
the
too.
top end and I'm on the bottom end. So I'm 1980 and she's 1970. So we're at the very
I'm
opposite end.
75, so I'm right in the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah. And we joke about that because you do want to be inclusive.
Hmm.
But we were, and this is no disrespect to allies.
Yeah, me either.
I do
Stop
not
adding stuff.
Yeah, but I remember, like, I guess there's an ally flag now, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then some of the acronyms have ally in them. I'm like, well, you don't, no, you don't get to be like part of, you know, like we appreciate your support and all, and we love you, and you definitely are part of the community. But when we have an acronym that's half the alphabet, we got to make some cuts. You know, it's like a baseball team. We gotta, I say LGBT plus, and I don't know if you feel the same way. I think a lot of Gen Xers, when I talk to my wife and our friends, Q is, that word, I
Queer?
can't even say that word because it was
Yeah.
such a slur. It was as bad as the F word.
When somebody told me that stood for queer, somebody told me questioning, somebody told me queer. I'm like, that's back? We brought that back? I remember
Yeah.
queer as being a slur.
Oh yeah, it was
And
horrible.
yeah,
And so we
it's
can't
like
say
the
it.
N word. It's like the N word for gays,
Yeah.
literally. And I'm like, now we're reclaiming it. I'm fine with that, but and like pansexual, somebody told me they were pansexual, and I'm like, what is that? And they're like, well, because I make a joke about like stay out of my cupboard, but but I'm just like, they're like, I'm in love with everybody. I said, so bisexual? No. And they spent like 30 minutes trying to explain to me the difference between pansexual and bisexual. And I'm just like, okay, I mean, I'll call you whatever you want to be. I don't care. You identify exactly how you want. And it's just like demisexual. That's the latest one. And it's
Oh,
people that can only have sexual pleasure if they're in love with somebody. And I'm like, so, okay. Yeah, they're adding that to the
yeah.
alphabet. And I'm just, but that just sounds like most women I know,
Yeah, I mean, it's like really it's about people that have been historically discriminated against. And
yeah.
that's where I'm like, and then also the I, for intersex.
Mm,
So I know some people that are intersex, and there are some people that identify as part of the community and some people that don't want anything to do with the
yeah.
community. And
Yeah.
so I feel like when I say QI, like I'm lumping people in that may not identify as part of the community. And so we just say in our house, we say LGBT plus, and my wife
Yeah.
calls it premium package. She's like, you mean the premium package? I'm like, yeah, the premium package.
I
And
love that.
it's not meant to, you know,
It's
um,
just, it's generational. We don't, a lot of the words that they use were considered slurs when we were
right.
young adults. So it's different. And demisexual, okay, fine, add it if you feel the need to, but I don't think anybody that has to be in love with somebody to have sex with them is a discriminated group, but okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's, in one sense, labels are a good thing because it helps you understand. And in another sense, they just get to be problematic.
Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, just the premium package for me, please.
I'm gonna start calling it that. That's awesome. That is awesome. Um, but anyway, so you officially you were kind of non-practicing, but then you officially resigned in 2015.
Yeah.
Your membership in the LDS Church, and is your family? Do you still have a good relationship with your family?
Um, it's complicated. So my dad has not been active for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of certain things that went on that involved the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I can't say what his specific beliefs are, but we have a good relationship. I have a good relationship with my brother. He was married in the temple and then later left. My sister is very active. We don't speak. Um, and not necessarily because of that, although that when I came out, that was a big wedge in our relationship. My mom, I kind of have the same relationship. I get the sense that you have a similar relationship to your mom that I have to my
Mm.
mom. Not what I would call healthy. I don't know about yours, but with my mom, it's not
Not healthy. It's
Yeah,
better that we don't talk.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
whole history of emotional and verbal abuse with her and me anyway. So yeah, it's just best we don't talk.
Yeah, and that's, with my mom, part of the reason I became interested in the Daybell case is because uh, there were some things in my childhood, and I just think, oh, my mom did that. Like when we talk about Lori Daybell, my mom
Mm.
said demons were chasing us, and
Yeah.
driving 100 miles down the road. But so we don't talk because uh, we had another fight. We've had a tough relationship, but I think she's generally supportive, but she doesn't realize like there is it's called Proclamation to the Family, or Proclamation of the Family to the World. It is a document that the church came out with in 95. I think it was under Hinckley. Yeah, Hinckley presented it. It's what I like to call on her wall of homophobia. It's a pretty like traditional marriage document. It really is. If you read it, it's clear that it's a message to come out against LGBT plus families. A man and a woman, and there are only two genders, and all of that. But it's in like every Mormon household. I think most Mormons don't even realize that it's kind of a homophobic statement.
Mm.
It means something different to them. So who am I to say that they view it as, they can view it how they want? To them, it may just be like it stresses the importance of family.
Yeah.
But I did bring it up to my mom, and I was like, you're so supportive, except for your wall of homophobia.
We grew up listening to Focus on the Family, very much the same thing
Oh,
there, I'm
Lord.
sure.
Yeah.
James Dodd's, yeah, very homophobic.
Yeah. And that's way worse. The Mormon Church has, it's just with a lot of religions. But it, to me, feels like a more supportive environment than a lot of other fundamentalist
Oh yeah.
religions. Now, I can't speak for the breakoffs and like the FLDS and that. I'm sure they are. I mean,
Oh,
good
they're
Lord.
horrible. I did a deep dive on that. They're horrible. I mean, I did the one that Warren Jeffs was the bishop or the Messiah or whatever his title was that he was claiming at the time. That was horrible. I mean, they usually kick children, especially boys. They're like excommunicated by the time they're 16
Oh
because
yeah,
these old dirty old men don't want the competition.
they just take them, drop them out in the desert.
Yeah, there you go,
I mean,
kid.
nothing. And they'll, yeah, I have a cousin. I don't know really where she is right now.
Mm.
But she did, because the Mormon faith is subject to interpretation. Uh, she decided that the church had gone astray, and now she's in some fundamentalist sect. And I'm just like, I really hope that she's safe. I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully it's not the FLDS.
No, hopefully not. Those tend to be like concentrated in the Arizona desert.
Hildell, and
Yeah, all the
it
way up
straddles.
into like Canada, actually, into the Yukon.
Yeah, that's where my relatives went back. They all practiced it. So
yeah.
Levitt, Canada, if you're Canadian, you might know of that. It's up in Alberta. Yeah, that's my family. Yeah, it borders, and it's funny because I worked for a package. Well, I worked for UPS and in sales, and the sales rep over that area was like, she had to wear long sleeves, long dress. A lot of the business owners wouldn't even talk to her. Yeah, it was she was like, I go there and get the hell out.
That's like, the town that dreaded, what is it? God, what's the name of that city? And the haunted hills have eyes. It kind of reminds me of that in a way. I mean, we have some, areas like that up here in Appalachia too, because I still live in like that chain. There's some small podunk towns up here where the backwoods Baptists and the Pentecostals are a lot like that too. So yeah, it can be equally creepy.
Like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so now you're out, you're well adjusted. Do you claim any sort of religion anymore? Or are you just more like are you an atheist? Or are you an agnostic? Are you a theist? Or
Well, my brother calls me a non-committal atheist. He says I'm an atheist with commitment problems. Um, Maybe agnostic. You know, it's kind of interesting because, I have my criticisms of the Mormon Church, but as far as what the beliefs are, if
Mhm.
they're not hurting anybody,
That's
I'm
me.
cool with that. A lot of my issues come from the influence on policy and
Mhm.
and other business aspects, corporation, church
Yep.
owned so much land and so many businesses. That's more where my criticism comes from, and the actions that they've taken. But as far as the beliefs, I don't believe in them anymore. Um, but I don't really care. If I know so many Mormons and they are good people and they have great family values. Utah is one of the healthiest states, healthiest
Mhm.
economies. So it works, for the
Yeah.
state as far as I guess some aspects. I don't really know what I believe in. It's one of those things where I just like I hope that there's something, but I am an analytical person by nature, and I think it's like hard for me to wrap my head around it now, especially I don't know if it's like that for you where you were so religious and
Mhm.
then when you leave a religion, I feel like a lot of people I know a lot of people that left the Mormon church and they become atheists because it's like you were so indoctrinated and then that's not true. So what is true? Like that was my
Yeah.
big crisis.
That's me. I had a huge breakdown after I finally admitted that there's probably no God, probably no higher power, and then I just became very depressed for a long time, and then I got angry, and I became just this terrible anti-theist that was just burn religion down, burn the churches down, and I'm not like that anymore. I have a great respect for religion. I can respect religion as long as it doesn't influence our government and the lives of everyday people. As
Yeah.
long as you keep church and state separate, I'm fine. I'm a little where it gets muddy is like here in Tennessee, there's actually, it's been ruled unconstitutional, but the law is still on the books where you can't run for public office in my home state unless you claim a religion.
Oh wow.
I mean, it's been ruled unconstitutional and it would never hold up, but they still haven't bothered to take it off the books,
Yeah.
and so that's a little scary.
Yeah.
Uh, if you look back at our founding fathers, a lot of them were not Christians in the traditional sense that people think they're Christian. I mean, Thomas Jefferson, especially John Adams, they were Unitarians, they were theists, but they weren't evangelical Christians in the sense that a lot of people think they were.
Yeah,
So
and I think DS, right? I think
deists, they believed in a higher power, but Thomas Jefferson did not believe in the deity of Christ. Neither did John Adams. John
that's why they
Hancock.
came over here, right? Because King George
Yeah,
was like shoving stuff, and that's why the Constitution and all that is written. If you read the Declaration of Independence, so it's an interesting thing when people say that, and maybe it is in their point of view. Um, but yeah, it's this country is very interesting these days.
yeah, it is. I don't even like to talk about that. I just hope that we can heal our wounds and come back together. I think the majority of American people are like you and I. They're very level-headed. They will make it okay,
Yeah.
eventually. It's these outspoken ones on the extremes of both sides that won't shut up. I'm just like,
Yeah.
yeah,
If you can't see a flaw, if you can't see one single flaw in an organization or a religion that you belong to, then you need to look at that. Because
yeah,
there is a flaw in everything. And in working in policy, I can tell you that there is no perfect policy.
hmm
And I'm talking health policy. I
hmm
mean, it does not matter. I work with both parties, and uh, everybody brings something to the table.
yep,
I don't agree with everybody, but policies they are so complicated. It's kind of like this case, this Daybell case, right? We want
hmm
it to be simple. This is a matter of like people that are evil and done. And it's like, well, it's not simple. Nothing is simple.
no, they're let's talk about the Daybell case. Just like you said, there's so many avenues there. There's religion, people being warped by religion, and not even like traditional LDS. This is
Right.
a fringe belief that's totally off the chain. It's like they're taking evangelical Christianity, like the Left Behind mentality, the famous Left Behind books, and they're
Mhm.
mixing them with fundamentalist LDS and traditional LDS, and then they're taking something totally out of it. Then you've definitely got mental illness in there.
Oh, yeah, for
So,
sure.
tell me your take on the Daybell case.
So I have an interesting perspective. One, my mother was severely mentally ill,
Mm-hmm.
and at times she would have delusions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, listening to Lori and Lori's history, I can identify with, I wouldn't say identify, because I mean, when you're a kid and I mean, it's not though completely unusual. People are talking about how Lori talked about the second coming and how, she just wanted to drive her kids off a cliff. That's not just Lori. There are a lot of really religious Mormons that totally believe that. That doesn't mean they're gonna do it,
Mm-hmm.
but because the second coming is so scary, but then it's also supposed to be good. It's like you get the crap scared out of you, but at the same time, if you're righteous, right, it's
Yeah.
not supposed to be a horrible thing.
I grew up in an atmosphere where they thought the end of the world was coming any day now.
Yeah.
Any day now, the rapture. You're going to be
Yeah.
taken out, and everybody, if you're left down here, you're going to go through the tribulation, then you're going to be judged. And
Yeah.
I could never understand why these people were like so happy, seemed so happy about it. I'm like, I don't want the world to end personally. I like the world. I like my life.
Yeah, I
But,
remember my mom was having a conversation with another lady, and the other lady says, oh, I cannot wait for the second coming. I'm so excited. My mom's like, oh yeah, I'll be, and I'm sitting there at like 14 going, I'm gonna go get myself a glass of water.
yeah, it's child abuse in a lot of ways, and
Yeah, I
and I
totally think that.
and I think it was just maybe oil and fire meets kerosene when she met Daybell, and
Absolutely.
yeah. Did you see
I
that
think,
movie that Lifetime did?
no, because I don't have that. I listened to your your
Okay.
synopsis.
They like totally made Chad to be the bad guy, and he's the one that wanted to get rid of the kids, and I'm not sure I buy that. I'm
No,
sure I think he's kind of a pussy myself. I mean,
uh,
I'm not
he
saying that he's not capable, but I don't think he was
right.
the mastermind.
No, I think, and I think you said this too. It's kind of like they both are, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
one of the things, because it's difficult when I talk about, Lori, the mental illness component and the religious teachings component, because people are like, well, she just wanted those kids out of the way and she just wanted to murder, and it's just more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Charles, it was a different motive,
Mm-hmm.
and most of my anger comes in as far as like blame. I have a lot of anger towards how the church handled that, how the police handled that,
Mm-hmm.
how all these people that in the church, if you have questions like that, you're supposed to go to your bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't these people go to their bishops and say,
Yeah,
Chad's saying some weird shit? You know,
yeah.
it's
Chad is having an
complicated.
affair. Uh,
Yeah, and when people were like, "Oh, Tammy," when they said, "Oh, Tammy didn't know she's on the other side of town," I'm like, "Rexburg has one side of town. Like, it's a tiny town." They knew. Tammy knew, I
knew
think.
it. Tammy might have been planning to leave him, and that's the reason that I mean, I know that hasn't been settled, but a perfectly healthy woman passes away overnight. She was poisoned. I truly believe that because they must have found something when they exhumed her, or they wouldn't have indicted him. You know.
Yeah, just, I mean, I think the way that I tell people when I talk about my own mother's illness is I say, no, mental illness explains things. It doesn't necessarily excuse them. And I try
Yeah.
and say that over and over because I think some people think I'm being too sympathetic to her. But
Hmm.
I'm like, this is just part of the story that we have to understand, um, that it did play a role. The religion played a role. The
Absolutely.
Mormonism played a role. Unfortunately, it was uh, it wasn't the cause, right? The Mormon Church didn't cause this. There are connections, and that's why I hesitate taking the church completely out of it. I know that there's been a big push to like really say this has nothing to do, but the beliefs, even the multiple lives, multiple probations, that's something I was never taught growing up. It's not part of the core doctrine, but there are some scriptures that if you're twisted, like some people, you could interpret them that way. And near-death experiences are huge in the Mormon Church. And that's been for decades. I have books from like the 70s and 80s of Mormon authors that talk about near-death experiences beyond the veil. That's a big thing. So there are connections, and I think any reasonable Mormon would say, yeah, we were taught about this, but not about that. Like that is way, I think if you know your scriptures, if you know the past, especially under Benson, which was the prophet when I was a little kid, Mr. Hellfire and Brimstone, you can see these, but also you can see that they're not traditional Mormon doctrine or beliefs that.
One thing I've always wanted to know, because in his books, specifically the ones that are fictitious around the end of the world, they take on a doctrine, I think, that's known as the white camps, where they're anticipating a day when the bishop will come in, or the Messiah, the Messiah, the head of the Mormon Church, will just come in and say, or the president will just come in and say, it's time to go. We've got these camps prepared for you. The whole world's about to fall apart. And a lot of them tend to stem around that doctrine. Is that a doctrine in the traditional LDS Church? Is that more of a fringe belief?
So it's kind of one of those things where it's not necessarily taught. It may be implied in certain teachings, but from what my understanding is, I do know that in the event of the second coming, or in the event surrounding, and it's so big. Like I was like, I'm thinking of doing a video just to explain it, but it'll be like,
that would be wonderful if you could.
Yeah, but there is the saints shall gather in Missouri. This is why I think Lori, where the Missouri comes in with Lori, and that people would travel there. It's kind of changed. When I was a little kid, all the saints would gather in Missouri, and now, well, no, because Bruce R. McConkie, okay, it had to have been before. Anyway, then they said, well, it's not every saint. It was in pioneer days, right? Because there were a small enough number that they could all gather in Missouri.
Right.
When the church got a few million members, they were like, well, not everybody. So there is that you gather, and there is this, and I think it's Enoch in the Bible. I think this is one of those that crosses over, but a city that was translated. You tell me if it's not a translated city with translated citizens that were taken up to heaven, and then they'll come back down.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually in Enoch. It's also in Revelation, and I believe not Jesus, but a couple of Isaiah may have spoken about that too.
Yeah, so there's that, and then but this Zion / what do they call it? New Jerusalem. So that was supposed to be in Missouri too, and then like I said, Zion is kind of, if you really read multiple things, leaders have said, well, Zion is it's not fictitious, but there's not a specific Zion, and I think that's where Chad got the idea of like Idaho and Arizona, where he's like, oh, according to me, yeah, Idaho, because I don't want to leave my kids, right?
Right.
So anyway, the white camps. Now in Helaman, which is a scripture, it's what I consider the bummer scripture of the Book of Mormon. It's very similar to Revelations, and so is the Doctrine and Covenants. Really, there are tents and camps, and during like the wars, and there are different parallels, I guess. I never heard of the term white camp. I've heard of righteous people living in righteous cities, like New Jerusalem would be a righteous city. So these tents, it makes sense to me that they would be sent to these tent cities. I do think that where they were talking about how the bishop would say everybody with food storage, come together and then we'll distribute the food storage. Because Mormons don't believe, like when you prep and stuff, this is my understanding, because they're really into it. The church has its own food storage company.
Right.
But they don't necessarily think, oh, I'm going to prep and all this stuff is going to be mine. It's more like I'm going to prep and make sure I have a year, and then we will share it. Like even all the silos and the church stuff, it's like for a time of need for people that need it. So it's not like, non-Mormons are going to be pushed out. But so I think these were like cities for the righteous, or I think they were more like refugee camps. There's some different things, but I know that it's mentioned. As far as like, I know that apparently all the churches are equipped so that if they could become temples if needed. Right now they're not dedicated as temples. That's different. You have to have the VIP card to get into the temple, but so that they could be. There are also tunnels under the Salt Lake Temple and under Salt Lake, and they have their purposes. That's never really been explained to me, but that's, there's definitely, like I said, Mormons are organized, man.
That's what I was about to say. They are much more organized. I mean, I grew up with the whole end of the world scenario, Armageddon, the way it was taught to us that if you don't get taken in the rapture, you're just going to be miserable here, and no amount of preparation you can do is going to make your life any better. You're just going to suffer through. You accept Christ, and maybe he'll judge you, on the other side to come into paradise. So it was just like a very, but it sounds like the Mormons, probably because of the pioneer background, they believe they can make it on their own. They'll take care of everybody until the second coming when you're going through the bad times. I have to admire that. Very well organized.
Yeah. And they are, like, I would say one of the things that I think draws people to the faith is that it is a little more optimistic than other faiths, right? You do have the three kingdoms and stuff, but they really, outer darkness, which is also called perdition, they talk about how that's not just like, that's for if you absolutely follow Satan. That's not for, just as gays. We're going to the celestial kingdom probably, so there's the three kingdoms and then there's that. But even Joseph Smith wrote, I believe that even the celestial kingdom is much better than the earth. So that no matter what, we'll go to a better place.
Yeah, it'll probably be the most well-decorated kingdom.
I know. Mormon temples are gorgeous. So if they have that same interior designer up in the spirit world, it is going to be architecture that is just amazing.
I like that. I did not realize that in their doctrine, everybody kind of makes it. It's just different levels of paradise. I haven't heard that before. I can see why people would be drawn to that, especially people like me that were drawn with you're either going to heaven or hell, and being gay is the same as murder. You know,
Leviticus, but I'm like, but we weren't mentioned in it. Lesbians weren't mentioned.
No, it's just men. And I think that's society. So I think overall society, and probably back when the sheep herders wrote those books, they were okay with women doing what women do, but not men.
Yeah, we talk about that too. Like, that it's just we're safer in a way, socially and everything. We're more acceptable, than like like I would say, I shouldn't say that, but people will talk about how like, oh, I'm fine with lesbians, but oh yeah, I couldn't be around a gay guy because he would be attracted to me. And it's like, no, he wouldn't. They have space, those guys.
No. They know who's gay and who's not.
And when I came out, I think people were worried because I was a dance mom. And so I remember after I came out, I walked into the dressing room like I had for 10 years. And people were like, kind of like pulling their girls. And I was like, for hell's sake. And that was my sister's response, honestly. And I was like, pedophiles are different than lesbians.
I was sexually abused by a female growing up, my stepmother, not my mom. But I can tell you, doing studies on that, statistically, pedophiles are, if you can call them that, They're straight men and women. They are not people. Gays just don't do that.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah. A lot of people ask me though. I don't know if they ask you. They'll be like, "Oh, so were you sexually abused?" And I'm like, "Well, that's none of your business."
Well, it wasn't, but yes, I was, but that had nothing to do.
Yeah.
I knew I was gay long before that happened.
Yeah.
I knew I was gay and congregant. Yeah.
3 out of 4 girls are not 3 out of 4 girls aren't lesbians.
No.
So
We're a solid 10-15% of the population, and that really hasn't changed.
yeah. So it's interesting the way society has changed for the good in a lot of ways,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. I mean, forever being gay was considered a mental illness. It didn't get out of the health, the mental health diagnosis book until what, the 70s?
Yeah, I think it was maybe 72. It might have been
Yeah.
76.
And they just removed transgenderism, I think, within
Yeah.
2021. So it hasn't been long.
And that I will tell you because I've been on the side of the transgender community in Utah, and I really think it comes down to if you don't know someone, you only have to meet one person, one transgender person, and you'll change. You have to see the humanity. I think we dehumanize people and
I have
yeah.
I have one very good transgender friend. It's not because the only one that I happen to know. And if anyone ever said anything out of the way to her, I think I'd want to kill them. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. She's such a good heart and such a gentle soul. I can't imagine anyone being cruel to her. And I can tell you that's the one part. That's one of the. I don't understand it because I'm cis. I'm
Right.
not meant to understand it. I was born a female, identify as a female. I don't understand it, but I don't have to. You don't have to understand it to be a decent person.
Right.
If I come up to you, I'm going to say, ma'am, miss, because you appear to be a female to me. But if you turned around and said, I'm non-binary, I will call you by whatever pronouns you ask me to call you. And
Yeah.
that's being a decent person.
Right. Yeah.
All you have to do is tell me.
I joke with my dad because he's older, and we joke, and I just said, it comes down to being kind.
Yeah.
When you think it's all a PC issue, but it really just comes down to being kind and referring to people the way they prefer. He was like, "Oh, yeah, good point."
Yeah, it is. It is. Somebody could come up to me and tell me they identify as a dolphin, and that's out there. I might go, okay, but okay, flipper.
Okay. Yeah. What do you want me to call you?
Yeah.
Whatever floats your boat, as long as it's not harming other people. And I think, like that's the thing with, the Mormonism, and I know Mormonism is not a term that Mormons use. So I'm speaking colloquially in a lot of this because I'm sorry guys, but this is the way the world refers to you. It's okay. The world refers to me with names I don't like either. But yeah, it's not harmful in most cases, but one of the selling points was personal revelation, and that has really caused a lot of problems, as has the presence of spiritual gifts. And those are core parts of the doctrine. And I think that they, in some ways the church has really tried to address that, and in some ways it hasn't, right? It's a difficult place to be in, I guess.
If I could have one wish that applied to any religion, I would just wish that they would teach a doctrine of kindness. Whether or not you believe somebody's lifestyle is sinful or not, just be kind to them. Don't discriminate against them.
Yeah.
Just be kind.
And I think sorry, I interrupted. That's it.
No, that's all it is. Just be a good person. Just teach that doctrine. Be kind.
I think that the Mormon Church is pretty good about that. There's the Mormon Church and its teachings, and then there's the Mormon culture, and those are two different things. And it's the culture a lot of times that causes the problems.
Yep.
But I can say that Joseph Smith, he really did not like violence. He did not. I mean, he was a quirky little guy. Well, he actually was really tall, so a quirky big guy. But he did not endorse any violence. In fact, it wasn't until, and the Mormons, they were persecuted. Like
Yeah.
Hans Mill in Missouri, extermination orders. It wasn't
Yeah.
until then that he was like, listen, we got to fight back. We
Yeah.
have to do this. And then he wrote some things that justified it or whatever. Really, a lot of the violent stuff came after Joseph Smith, as far as like when we look at the
Yeah.
Mountain Meadows Massacre and Brigham Young and the things
Yeah.
he said.
Wasn't Joseph Smith and his brother like murdered
Yeah,
somewhere in
they were
Illinois?
shot. They were in jail and they were shot. Uh, there are some different takes on it. From what I understand, the guard, there's a story that the guard was going to protect them. I can't remember what the term was, the jailer or whatever, and he was trying to protect them. And then there's the story that he, oops, I unlocked it, that he was influenced by the mob that killed him. But yeah, he was. And there's a lot of history in there. He there are some things, yeah, we're going to talk about on my channel about him. But all the mysticism and is it mysticism or mysticism?
Mysticism.
Okay. Utah, we just pronounce things.
Same in Tennessee.
Yeah, we have a town in southern Utah, and it is spelled hurricane, and we call it hurricane. So yeah, we just pronounce. There are so many words that I mispronounce that my wife isn't from Utah, and she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Well, that's just the way we say it."
We have a couple of towns here in Tennessee. One of them is Lafayette, spelled Lafayette, but we pronounce it Lafayette.
Yeah, yeah. But a lot of that, the churches tried to hide it. I think, people are like, "Oh no, he wasn't associated with the Masons." There was none of that. And it's like, but he was. We have documents. It's okay.
But what's wrong with the Masons? I mean, I have one of my largest clients is a company that is primarily, the executives are all Freemasons, and
Yeah.
they are from Canada, and they are super nice guys.
Yeah.
I have nothing against Masons. If that's what Masons are, let them, whatever.
And that's the thing, people talk about like the crystals and all of that, pendulum work. And really, if it's not intended for evil, I don't, who am I to say? I really have, it's not my job. I don't prescribe to or ascribe to any faith or anything. And who am I to say that that is a wrong way to practice your religion? Where I have my issues is own it, own your past, fix your mistakes, the problematic doctrines, discuss them, make sure that your bishops do what they're supposed to do. When someone comes to them and says, "Oh, I'm either going to murder someone or I need a temple recommend," maybe say, "We need to sit and talk."
Yeah.
And then don't do therapy, because that's been a problem in the Mormon church is bishops try and provide psychotherapy and they shouldn't.
No, send them to an actual medical professional.
Yeah. And the church has made strides in that. I think they're getting the hint on that because they've gotten sued.
Yeah.
But that stuff, the body cam footage with Charles, once that bishop, I'm sorry, I mean no hate to go to anybody. I would hate for people, when I hear about people sending hate to anybody, as far as threats and things like that, that's too much. We cannot like these people. We're really talking about their behavior. But when he heard, Lori is talking about being a translated being, that should have been a huge trigger. And then when he was like, "Oh, it was third parties that told me everything was fine," I'm like, let me guess who it was. Felony Melanie.
Maybe what's his name? Jason Mao.
Oh, I think that's with the police investigation for sure.
Oh yeah, and he's big old charlatan.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically taken the Book of Mormon, because I've read a couple of his books too, and basically taken the Book of Mormon and put it in storybook form and has made a fortune off of it. I mean, he's a big old charlatan.
Oh, a lot of them, Julie Rowe, like this. A lot of this stuff isn't new.
Yeah.
It's definitely not new. It's just been now it's in the public, and the church is like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
now this is affecting us.
Uh,
Um,
One of
but
the
it's
biggest things is when they say, "Oh, we never said that African Americans were descended from Cain." Yes, you did. You wouldn't even let
Brigham
them join
Young.
the church.
If you read anything that Brigham Young wrote, I mean, why did you name a university? Like, you should change that. If any name needs to be changed in Utah, it would be that. They
Yeah,
should, like, we don't want to call it Brigham Young. Who cares? Like,
should
he
call it
was,
Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith sounds like a much kinder man.
yeah, I think he was. I mean, I think he was kind of a predator, but I also
Yeah,
think as far as he wasn't hateful. In fact, there were priesthood holders under
yeah,
Joseph Smith that were black.
yeah.
And so he definitely was not. A lot of Mormons during his time were abolitionists, and that's why they
Mm,
were hated in Missouri.
yeah.
Or part of the reason they had their own, they were the chosen people and were kind of, snobby and stuff. That pissed people in Missouri off too, but they were also abolitionists, a lot of
Yeah.
Mormons.
And they were fundamental in the settling of the West, at least Utah and Idaho and parts of Arizona. I mean, we wouldn't have had our westward expansion without the Mormons. And the only reason they got rid of polygamy, I found out, was Utah would not be accepted as a state until they did.
Yeah. And they sent my ancestors to Canada to
Yep,
continue it.
yep, yep.
You were like, yeah, well, we still want to. I mean, still, if you look at the scriptures and the doctrine, when we die, we are going to practice polygamy in the spirit world, or at least in the celestial kingdom.
Mhm.
My brain gets clouded every once in a while, but it is actually an eternal doctrine. I was told when I was a kid, like, well, yes, it's for a different time. We're supposed to practice it after this life is over, but it's definitely not something that has been completely abandoned. And in fact, I can tell you that polygamous sects, including the Christians, the not the Christians, the Kingstons, they give a lot of money to Utah politicians, a lot of money, and that is why you don't see people uh, prosecuted.
Mhm.
Very rarely do you see, and it's something usually with the sexual abuse that's being
Mhm.
prosecuted. So when, like, that family on TLC, when they Browns or whatever, right,
Yeah,
sister wives,
yeah.
when they were like, oh, we're gonna be thrown in jail and we're so scared, we got to go to Vegas. I was like,
No, you're not.
I was like, I grew up next to polygamous. Nobody cares. Everybody knows. It's just, it's
I
part.
believe it should be legal. I see. That's me. I'm a libertarian. I believe it should be legal
If you
as
are
long
two consenting adults, or if you are all consenting and you haven't been coerced, and that's how
do
you want to live,
go for it.
totally fine.
I
Uh,
also believe prostitution should be legal as long as it's consenting adults that enter it for their own reasons and not trafficking.
yeah,
I believe it should all be legal. Just consenting adults,
yeah.
individual liberty. Just do it. Don't hurt anybody else, but do it.
I have similar views on drug policy.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe I am
legal.
more libertarian. I
Yeah.
thought I was really left wing, and now talking to you. No, I'm
Well,
kind of the.
libertarian, that's what people get. Libertarians often align themselves with right wingers because of our fiscal policy. We believe in absolutely minimum taxes. So we're against like government spending for certain programs. We believe private enterprise should take care of the welfare system and blah, blah, blah. So that's why we end up aligned over there. But our social policy is about as far left as you can get.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'm very, very left, and healthcare policy is a huge passion for me.
Hmm.
But like I said before, you have to be able to work with people to get policies to go, and
Hmm.
not policies are not perfect. You will never get a perfect policy,
No.
but you can come to some sort of agreement and say, this isn't so bad, right? Like, at least we have X or Y. Um, so it's interesting because I was like so one way, and then after I got into policy, I was
Yeah.
like, life isn't like that, I guess.
No, you got to be able to bipartisanship is how we get stuff done. And when we got leftists getting mad for, Democrats working with Republicans or far right getting mad for Republicans working with Democrats, that's the only way we get anything done. There's a middle that we can all meet that will get some of everything done. And
Yeah,
that's the way we have to look at it. Well, my very, very far left friends that are all about, almost socialists, literally. I'll say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, taxes. Well, if the government owns all the enterprise, where are those taxes coming from? You don't have private business anymore, and they'll just go. I'm like, how you gonna pay for it? And then they get mad at me. I'm like, it's true. How you gonna pay for it?
I have my undergrad, I minored in economics, but any type of policy degree, you do public finance and all of that. And nothing is perfect.
No.
You will pay for it somewhere, no matter what. And it's all about priorities. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is what are your priorities?
Yep.
And then you match up those with, your system or whatever.
Absolutely. I agree.
See, people can talk about politics and not fight.
Yeah. Left, libertarian, and we're talking.
It's totally possible. There's a Republican in Utah, and he likes to troll on Twitter, and he is hilarious because he's very socially progressive. So he's been on the side of the LGBT plus community. He's always on the side of the LGBT plus community and women's rights. But he is the funniest troll because, most of the time I'm like, dude, like, but then he says things, I'm like, I cannot argue with you there. Kick certain people out of office that are more into their own agenda. And that's
term limits.
The spectrum.
There's no reason that the same senators that were in power when I was in elementary school in my home state of Alabama should still be there.
Yeah.
And that's just no.
When you cross the threshold, when you're at that age where people are like, should we take their keys away? You shouldn't be in that.
No, you should not be
anymore.
Absolutely.
That's just my opinion. But we had Orrin Hatch, who was there. Oh dear. Yeah. That guy was there a long time.
Yeah.
Enough. And we see the court case with the Daybells, it's gonna be a long road. And I say Lori Daybell because I don't believe that she deserves to be called Vallow.
Yeah. She killed him or had him killed. I mean,
yeah. And she was destroyed.
And now that Arizona has actually indicted her for conspiracy and that. Now, I don't think Arizona has the same as Idaho where you can just avoid trial by saying you're not fit for trial. I think Arizona has a guilty by reason of insanity plea or verdict, option. So she may end up having to go to trial in Arizona. I hope so.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Because I didn't think Idaho was very, Utah, Idaho, and Arizona, it's a lot of like the
Wild West.
When they said she was incompetent, I made that was actually I think the first video I made because I was like that it's not, they don't throw that around. I can tell you that. I've been it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And personally me, I would rather her be considered incompetent at this stage of the game. Because at this stage, it's not going in front of a jury. But if they don't take care of it now and she goes in front of a jury, we don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Right. I mean, she's going to stay in jail. I mean, they're not going to let her out. So she's off the streets. She's not going to be able to hurt anybody else. But Arizona may actually send her to trial because I think there's statutes a little bit different and that you can't avoid trial by you can go and, plead not guilty by reason of insanity and have that be an outcome, which Idaho doesn't have that, which is why she's able to avoid trial.
Yeah, it'll, because I don't really know how that works. I know some things, I haven't looked into that much as far as, usually I'm looking at the macro type of stuff. Yeah. So this is a little different because I'm like, oh, well, what's this? So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I was not aware that, well, I could have figured it, but Rob Wood is Mormon. I did not know that until recently. John Pryor, is he?
I'm not sure. I know that Daybell, I know the only reason Daybell has him is that he basically wrote his entire farm or state land over to him. Now, I don't know how much that estate is worth in Rexburg, Idaho.
I don't know.
But, as you said, property prices are increasing. Maybe he thinks it's going to make it be worth his while. I know that he wrote his entire, what's left of his book publishing company over to his kids. And stuff like that. But I don't know. And I'm sure every book that he sells, any proceeds are going to pay his legal defense,
Oh
I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because I'm starting to think that John Pryor's strategy, just the way, and I haven't seen everything, is that he's going to try and make this into a Mormon, their Mormon beliefs caused all of this. And honestly, I don't agree with it, but I can see how he could make that argument because of the doctrine, because of some of the scriptures. Because like I said, there's like one talk by Heber C. Kimball, and it I think has to do with baptism, like being renewed or having a second chance or something like that. And there's a few little ones like that. And I think they were like, oh, multiple lives, which that's not a thing. Not a thing. So it's a lot of that. So you could make those connections. Spiritual gifts are going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
And individual or personal revelation. I think those are areas where John Pryor can really use to his advantage.
Also, their time in Hawaii, I'm sure from some of the Zulema Pastanes connection. I mean, she may have been involved with that Love Has Won cult, which makes sense if you so I think there was some New Age mysticism mixed in with some of their beliefs. So it's not all Mormon causing this. It's a lot of different things.
They looked at a lot of the older texts. So, and I think it was something like they would look at some of Joseph Smith's earlier writings that were more mystical, and then suddenly, Chad's doing the same. He's doing pendulum work, which Joseph Smith did do that. You can actually read on the church website. It's one of the things that they haven't changed about divining rods and seer stones and stuff like that. So some of that, I mean, you can make loose connections. Also, though, that was, I think, common in Joseph Smith's times, because there was a religious revival, and Mormon, it was just one faith that happened to survive.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I have a feeling that there is a way, as I'm reading through it, as I'm hearing stuff, I'm like, I can see arguments that John Pryor could make and connect the Mormon church to it. And
absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that is the Mormon church. And I think that's what people get wrong when they hear me, because they assume that I'm saying that the Mormon church is responsible.
No, not at all. It's like saying that any John List that wiped out his entire family and got caught 16 years later, he was a devout Catholic. I don't think the Catholicism had anything to do with or Lutheran. He was Lutheran. Don't think the Lutheran Church has anything to do with that murder. Who was the mom that drowned her kids because she thought the end of the world was coming? Yeah. Do I think her church had anything to do with that? No, not really. It's religion mixed with mental illness, which is a lot of what this is. Yeah, can cause that.
Yeah, and I think Andrea Yates, she was really sick. Lori is kind of a difficult one because, on one hand, the mental illness is there, and she was enabled to get worse. On the other hand, she was going through with bank accounts. She was committing Social Security fraud. She was doing a lot of things that it's like, how can you be insane and do that? And I don't think she's ever insane. But there is an ability to do that. Like I saw with my own mom, absolutely 100 miles down the freeway, trying to say like, command demons to leave, but at the same time able to like walk on a military base and totally like get on the base with no credentials and just like convince everybody that she was some colonel, like,
wow.
So there is a genius to it. I don't know if there are so many different levels of mental illness, and because one person has bipolar does not mean another person with bipolar is the same.
Yeah.
And it's difficult because you don't want to lump people in, know. And there are people like Andrea Yates that absolutely, I think is a really, really sad case of mental illness. And Lori's case is definitely more difficult to pin down. Ultimately, she oh, I guess I have to say allegedly, um, committed murders or knew, and you are responsible for your
Your
action.
actions.
You know, it doesn't excuse her that she thought, you know, that these beliefs or whatever, she still knew it was wrong because she was covering things up. She,
Mhm.
you know, she was taking certain actions. She was fleeing all of this stuff. So, um, it's sad. You know, I really feel for um, some of her friends and family, maybe not
Yeah.
all of them.
I feel for her mom and her sister. I think they finally came to terms with the fact that she's in on it. You know, they completely defended her. I really feel bad for the Woodcocks. I mean, they when I think about it, I'm like, Lori, if you wanted to be rid of the children, why didn't you just send them to the Woodcocks? You know,
Exactly.
Woodcocks, they would have taken in Tylee too. I
And
have
Tyler
no
got her
doubt.
GED.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I, you know, that is the saddest. I mean, it's the only way that I have been able to make any sense of it is that the way they were treated, the way their bodies were treated,
yeah.
and how they were found. I mean, I think it was, I'm going, they're going to be resurrected. That's why she was going to Missouri, thinking that she was going to be reunited with them. I think
Mhm.
Charles was a different story, and Charles was that that's pure evilness, and
For the
that was
money, for the life insurance, basically, is
cold
what it
blooded,
was. Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
just for the Woodcocks, the Vallow family, everything that they have gone through and continue to go through, because this is not going to end,
No, I
maybe
mean,
never, but will
Tammy Daybell was a victim. They tried to
it?
kill Brandon Boudreaux. Uh, you
Chad
know,
Daybell's parents apparently were very good, very nice people.
yep.
I mean, to have your child, I mean, there needs to be a support, like I think there needs to be a support group for families that go through this, like
Yeah.
support group for families of the perpetrator and
Mhm.
the victims, like
Families
they,
of the victims, yeah.
you know, it's because, you know, we can say, oh, we support you or whatever, but you know, we're people on the internet, or you know,
Yeah,
people writing letters and trying to write kind words. We have no idea, and you never get over a death, right? People always say, like, they try and tell you that, but there's always like a hole in your heart, and it never gets filled.
absolutely. And I know Kay probably blames herself because she's the one that got them to adopt JJ. You
Mm,
know, I can just tell, you know, by the looks in her eyes, she probably blames herself for it, and she shouldn't because she was trying to do what was best for her grandson. But
yeah, I think it was hard because too, everybody talks about how what a wonderful person Lori was, how she was always so positive and she was a great mother, and then it's like a major, you know, I have the word betrayal,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
like this whole time, like who would think she would do this, right?
yeah.
I mean, even as she's getting closer and closer and she's going off the rails more and more, I mean, to think someone is going to allegedly murder their own children, I think that anybody would have a really hard time catching that.
Hmm.
But there were a lot of areas someone could have stopped her.
Yeah,
And that's where I get frustrated with, you know, the bishops that were involved, with other people in the church, with, you know, felony Melanie.
oh, Melanie Gibb. I mean, do I think she was in on the murders? No. But do I think she could have stopped? Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And I hope her conscience eats her alive. I
And
really, if
before,
she has one, I hope it eats her alive.
yeah, I don't know. That book that you read, she seems pretty confident
Yeah,
um in where she's going.
yeah,
Um, but she could have stopped it long ago. But my biggest uh like thing that really gets me is the minute that she heard that JJ had gone dark. That is absolutely so far from the LDS faith.
yeah,
In the LDS faith, children under the age of 8 are pure. They are going to the celestial kingdom. I mean, it is, they cannot go dark.
yeah.
Absolutely.
She
And
should have been calling Kay then and
yeah,
telling her something was wrong, or calling the authorities for a welfare check or something. And then she was involved with what, David Warwick, who's as crazy as Chad in a way.
God,
So
uh, Yeah, I mean, I think all those people have a part to play, and they're guilty in some way. And I think she knew when she was enabling that. And um,
I think she turned to the police when she knew she had no choice. When they called her and said, "Oh, we're going to tell him that JJ's with you," I think she knew at that time JJ wasn't coming back, and she was going to be an accessory if she went along with that. And so that's why she
yeah,
turned on him at that point.
yeah, I think it was self-preservation, actually.
Yeah.
I think it was. And then when I listened to her in the audio and in the interview with the police versus Nate, I was
Mhm.
like, you
Yeah.
know, there's one thing she says in the police department audio or video, and I cannot get over it. She says she went into the house with Charles and he proceeded to act like himself. And I went, she
How
bought
else?
the line.
How else would he act? Yeah.
Right. But
Uh,
at that point, she was being told it wasn't
he was
Charles and
hard.
it was Ned or Nick or whatever. So in my mind, I'm like, she had bought into it. That's just the way I feel. Just, he proceeded. It's just an odd statement to make.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think she could have stopped it. Alex Cox, I mean, we'll never know how far gone he was, but he was some hitman.
Mhm.
And do I think he was poisoned? Probably. If they find out that, it does come out that Tammy Daybell was poisoned, there's no reason why Alex wasn't poisoned too. They would get rid of anybody that knew too much.
He was Lori's Porter Rockwell.
Yeah.
If you've ever heard of Porter Rockwell,
Yep.
is the bodyguard of
Yeah.
Joseph Smith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he really felt he was Porter Rockwell
Hmm.
in some sense, or had that role.
Yep. Yeah. And I believe they took him out too. We'll never know because he's already been cremated, but I believe they took him out too. I believe he was
Well,
poisoned.
someone commented on one of my videos and said it makes sense that there would be two alpha males and one would have to go.
Yeah.
And there's a chance that maybe Alex said something like, I don't think Chad's maybe he put some doubts in there and Chad was like, gotta get rid of him. This is all alleged.
Yeah.
Just the way I feel.
Exactly. Allegedly.
Yeah.
Well, it
I
has
have
been
no
one.
money. I'm a grad student. So.
Yeah. Sue me for what?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's been wonderful talking with you.
Yeah. Sorry I rambled on so much.
No, it's been one. I'll probably divide this into two parts, but
Yeah.
this has been wonderful. And
Yeah.
everybody, please go check out Jen's channel. I'll link it up here and down below. Give her some love. I think we're going to be doing a collab for your channel as well. So stay tuned for
Yeah, I
that.
have to talk to you about that. I have to figure it out because I haven't been on here very long. I have no idea
Yeah.
how to do this stuff.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and I'll say goodbye to my subscribers now. Until next time, Keto and Crime out.
Bye.
Hey. All right. Now I'm stopping the recording.
Okay.